The Texans forced 5 turnovers against the Giants, and I know it's just the preseason, but the defense is swarming. We're going to talk about that and more on this edition of The Bullpen.
To throw the punches away. He floats one wide open, and there he goes. Tagged down for a Texan touchdown.
Hello and welcome to The Bullpen. I am James Roy, and as always with me is Tom Chavarria. Tom, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a beautiful time to be a Houston sports fan. All the good things all over Houston sports, but we're here to talk Texans.
Exactly, and there's a lot of Texans to talk about, but before we get started, a couple housekeeping items. One, look out on Twitter this week. I just have passed 5K, so we're doing a giveaway for tickets to the Rams-Texans preseason game. I did the giveaway on Instagram last week, and the guy who went said he really enjoyed it. What a game to be at this past week for sure. And then also, I'd like to open the show with an open apology to Jalen Petrie. I apologize. I was not familiar with your game. I guess I should say I was. I believed in you, but I definitely really dwelled on last season a lot and really made a big deal of it. It's just preseason, but man, if you saw Jalen Petrie against the Giants, you'd think he was he shouldn't have been playing because he's just that good. Like, man, he was on it. Tom, do you have any? I'm going to give you the floor for your "I told you so" address, where you can say, I told you to be patient," and whatever you want to get out there, whatever you have to get off your chest. Let's hear it.
Did you just do the whole Eminem thing where you said everything I could say, so I couldn't say nothing?
Tell them something they don't know about me. I mean, come on.
Look, Jalen Petrie had a phenomenal game. I always felt like this was a guy that could be that good. I think we've seen flashes at different points in time. I'm glad that you are back with us on the Jalen Petrie bus. I think you were riding that Justin Simmons. Bring me somebody to replace this dude. It was fun, but now it's done. And I think Jalen Petrie said, "Hold up, let me cook."
All I'm saying is that I think a battle red Jalen Petrie jersey might be on my wish list moving forward. We're going to see. Actually, you can see the Christian Harris one in the background. That's a fake, so I just figured I'd hang it in the background so you guys could see it. If you're really a listener, you'll know now that that's the case. But a lot to talk about from this Texans-Giants matchup. 28-10. I say the final score to let you know that I know it, but realistically, in a preseason game like this, the final score is not super important. It's what we got out of it, what we got from the players. So we'll go on a rundown. We'll start with the offense and we'll just do rapid fire. Dameon Pierce, this preseason, I don't think has carried the ball more than 3 yards past the line of scrimmage, and I think he only did that once. That's his longest carry. What do you make of his performance? Do you think that it's too early to say that maybe the tide has turned and that maybe he's now went from easily the RB2 to maybe fighting for a roster spot, or is that just an overreaction during this preseason?
If you believe some of the Texans Twitter family, he's cut like all the way off the reservation. Like, hey, thanks, but you got to go. And I'm not that guy. Look, I can't go past two things. One, if you go look at Houston Stressens, if you're not following him, I don't know what you're doing. The guy is a wealth of knowledge, whether it's what he tweets, just his own words, or some of the stuff that he's passing through PFF and stuff like that. He had a huge breakdown. I believe it was earlier today, where he talked about all the grades for all the different positions throughout the first 3 games. And if you go look at that run blocking position, it was criminally bad all 3 games. So if you expected Dameon Pierce to be good, he's got to have better run blocking, in my opinion. Like, this team is built to pass block, and they're built to throw the ball all over the yard. So it's really hard for me when Dameon Pierce gets the lion's share against the better competition to go, well, I'm out on Dameon Pierce because he looks so bad. When you're watching these other guys run, Cam Akers, British Brooks, Jawar Jordan, you're seeing them run against 3s and 4s and having some success. And I get it. those guys are 3s and 4s for a reason. So for me, it's really hard to just go, you know what, Dameon Pierce, it's time for you to find employment elsewhere. I do hope that the run blocking gets better, and then we're able to say, okay, run blocking is good, and it's just Dameon Pierce, if that's the case. I'm not ready to say that, but I can see a lot of the Texans Twitter ready to put him on a rocket, ship him to the moon.
Yeah, that's the general sentiment. And even I've been guilty of something close to it. It's just, I'm more in the boat of it's hard to imagine that he's RB2 for sure based off of what we've seen so far. But I think that you gave a good point that is good for context, which is that he may not have put up a lot of yards, but he is playing against the other team's ones. And the only thing I can think of is that in the Giants game, it seemed like the ones were out there a lot longer than the Texans had their ones out there. So Akers may have gotten a couple carries against the Giants ones, but I can only confirm that was the case on offense. I'm not going to lie. I wouldn't have been able to tell you who the starters were on the Giants defense, except for indicated by Kayvon Thibodeau. And I was not looking at their personnel when I was watching the game as closely as I was looking at the Texans personnel. But with that in mind, I mean, it's 100% makes sense that Dameon Pierce would struggle more going against ones. It is concerning that against ones in preseason, he couldn't break somewhat of a run. I'm not even talking about something huge. I'm talking about maybe a 5-yarder. I don't know. I don't think we're asking a lot of Dameon Pierce to show us a little bit more. I'm not of the volition that he has played himself off the roster. I at worst, he's moved down to RB3. I don't think you can justify rostering another running back over him based off of reps against, like you said, the 3s and 4s. But I do think it's concerning. I think one guy, regardless of the competition, that looked really good was British Brooks. He has certainly become on the radar to potentially steal a roster spot. But, I mean, it would take a lot for me to move past the 4 running backs that I had to start the preseason. I do say I'm more certain that Mixon and Cam Akers make the roster than anyone else in the running back room, but that's not to say that I'm not high on Dameon Pierce making the roster. It's just a matter of where he falls on the depth chart. Now, looking at the rest of the offense, another thing that we've been looking for, we've been talking about this all offseason, and you would think if you were reading Texans Twitter that John Mechie was on the chopping block. And we've had that discussion. I told you I wasn't there yet. You said, I think it's a little bit of a quick decision. That's one of those times where I followed after you on this patience thing. And we got to see the crane this past Saturday. So, I mean, Mechie looked good. Now, here's my question about it. I'm not going to ask. We've already had the discussion of who's making the roster, who's not. I think we're both on the side that Mechie's probably making the roster. So I'll ask you this. The discourse on Twitter has been about chemistry between Mechie and the quarterbacking depth on the team. And it said that the only quarterback on the roster that he doesn't have chemistry with is Davis Mills. What do you make of that? Now I'll preface that with this. Big Sarge is the one who's pushing a lot of that. And I'll say this, Big Sarge tends to talk based from the experience of what he's seen. And so it's about if you trust Big Sarge's ability to read that kind of stuff. He is not a Texans fan, which gives me reason to believe he's not just shoveling stuff for the sake of it. I mean, so where there's smoke is my general thought, but I want to hear what you have to think about it or what you have to say about it.
I will say this. I do believe Big Sarge is really close to the team. So if he says it, I think he does it from that lens. I don't know how you could be John Mechie and be in the role that he's been in and know that he was not the top tier wide receivers and say he has no chemistry with Davis Mills, who's also been a backup. So more often than not throughout the season, you get the backup offense going against the starting defense. So you're telling me John Mechie's not out there with the backup offense? I can't see it. I don't know that it would matter because you're asking John Mechie to potentially, be wide receiver 4, 5, 6, something like that. So the only chemistry that I care about is him and CJ Stroud. Like, that's the only quarterback I want to see him throwing, or I want to see throwing the football to him throughout the regular season. The chemistry that him and Davis Mills would mean very little to me unless something terrible happened.
Yeah, and the way I see it is this, right? I I think both of us agree that Davis Mills is one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league, and that the Texans are in a solid spot. But I think we've both also expressed that like it's CJ Stroud or less than the Super Bowl is what we're expecting if he's not playing quarterback for the team. That being said, to give up on a guy because he doesn't have chemistry with your wide receiver 6 is interesting to say the least. I mean, if it's true or not, it doesn't matter. I agree with you. It more falls on the fact that, like, yeah, it'd be inconvenient if Mechie and Mills don't have chemistry and Mills has to play every once in a while. But I'll tell you this, I mean, the other discussion that's being brought up with that is that Mills didn't exactly make Nico Collins look like a superstar in the reps that they got together early on in his career. So, I mean, right now, I would say that Nico has progressed to a point where he could probably overcome a lack of chemistry or quarterback play. But all that to say, I mean, I think it's kind of a non-story. I just don't think that the chemistry between your wide receiver 6 and backup quarterback matters. But I think it speaks to what we've been speaking to this whole offseason, which is that the Texans are in such a good place roster-wise with the talent that we're not concerned about, Diggs, like outside sources are, or, Tank Dell or Nico Collins and the top part of the roster. The starters are the starters. They're good. So this is a discussion that fans are having because what do we do? Continually post every day about how fire this offense is going to be. I feel like I've posted about it too much, and I think I do it like every other day. I don't know, like there's only so much you can say about something that's so good. So I mean, I don't know. I just think it's kind of a non-story. But I mean, do you have anything else to say on that before we move to the next topic?
The thing that I would say that kind of speaks to what may or may not be why John Mechie flashed so much in this recent game as opposed to other games is where he was located on the football field. Again, Houston Stresson's doing all the dirty work. Really appreciate everything
if you don't
that
follow
guy
him,
does.
If you don't follow him, you are less knowledgeable on the Texans than you could be.
Yes.
Truly does it all. Truly does it all.
So where John Mechie's played by position throughout each of the preseason games. He played in the Hall of Fame game. He played out wide. He played out wide 29 times. And I'm trying to read this correctly so I don't give you. He played in the slot 4 times. The following game, out wide 21 times, in the slot 7 times. The game he went off in a position where I and you and we have talked about feel that he can dominate in the slot 20 times, out wide 14 times. So I think a lot of what you're seeing with John Mechie is positionally where they put him and where he's best able to succeed. And I think he's a great slot receiver.
100%. And I think we've spoken to it, him learning from Stephon Diggs, him, progressing this season is, I think, vital to the Texans wide receiver plans, depending on what Stephon Diggs decides he wants to do. Now, speaking of players that play on offense and catch the ball, let's talk about tight end briefly. The Texans tight end room, as you may have guessed, based off of how every other room in the entire offense is stacked. It is, for lack of better words, stacked. Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, so drafted Cade Stover, could slot at tight end 3, depending on who you ask. Brevin Jordan, and then obviously Dalton Schultz. My question for you regarding the tight end room. Brevin Jordan had been kind of quiet most of the preseason, most of training camp. In this game, he has a really good stretch and shows up in a big way. What do you make of what we got from him? And do you think that it confirms? Because, like, to me, right, based off of when this happened in the game, he's in there with the starters. And so if you're in there with the starters, we don't run a lot of 3 tight end sets. So you're tight end number 2. It's not Dalton, unless you're giving Dalton Schultz a blow. So what do you make of his usage and what he accomplished in this game? I
think he really solidified everything that we already knew, and that Brevin Jordan was going to be tight end 2. I think only the recent production from Cade Stover has kind of moved him up a peg because you didn't see Brevin Jordan, but nobody questioned his ability or whether or not him and CJ had a connection or where he was with this team. I think this game further let me know that you're going to get Dalton, you're going to get Brevin, and then I think you'll sprinkle in some Cade Stover. I'm kind of interested to see what a 3 tight end set would look like on a goal line, where you got Cade blocking, and then Dalton leaks out and you hit him. I mean, that'd be a different look for a team with all these offensive weapons.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is legitimately feasible, like as deep as the wide receiver room is, that you could run a 3 tight end set and still have upwards of 4 legitimately lethal threats to catch the ball, which is insane considering. And then if Ben Skoranek makes the roster and you place him at fullback, you literally could have 5, maybe like if you count all 3 tight ends and you're running, Skoranek, that's like, 5 or 6 legitimate targets that could all probably catch the ball at a high clip rate. And man, that's just, you got me thinking about that. I'm just, oh, but man, I mean, that's just how blessed the Texans are. We're blessing for sure. At every position group, but at tight end especially, I don't see a situation where tight end does poorly in the near distant future. Just based off where the Texans set it up. And it feels good considering that since Owen Daniels left, it's felt like the Texans tight end room has been full of a lot of potential and not a lot of, actual performance. So it's nice to have, actually good tight ends that are going to deliver in the regular season. So I'm excited about that. One more thing to talk about offensively is really just the O-line. And what I want to focus on is that with Laramie Tunsil being injured, I have 2 questions for you that both involve Blake Fisher. What do you make of his performance? Early false start, but did not allow a sack or pressure, looked pretty good in the left tackle role. And the other question is how do you feel about a left tackle wearing the number 57?
I don't care what number he wears, man. I don't care. I do love that. I feel like very confident that if something happens to either tackle, that Blake Fisher is absolutely a suitable sub. And while you won't get elite, Pro Bowler performance, I do believe that Blake Fisher will totally hold it down where you're not going, oh my God, name the edge rusher. He's going to eat that day. He had Kayvon Thibodeau, Ryan Burns, Derek Lawrence. Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, had all those guys coming off the edge at him. And
it is Dexter.
I know it was a D. Thank you. Dexter Lawrence. And no sacks. So that's the only thing I care about. Keeping CJ upright, keeping him clean is supremely important for this team. And I love what Blake Fisher adds. I think it was smart to go get him because you knew you had 2 guys that have had injury issues, and why not invest premium draft capital to make sure that if something were to happen, that you're good. Nothing changes.
Charlie Heck onto the field, I thought it was good. I mean, I thought that he handled himself well. There was reps where he definitely got toasted, but CJ is such a good quarterback that it didn't really matter. Like there was one where I think it's Dexter came off the edge and like bull rushed him into a little spin move that like just really he froze him and got around him. But CJ had already, that was the one where 4th and goal, he got the ball batted down at the line. So the ball came out quick. It wasn't a great play, but I mean, I think that Blake Fisher kind of got saved by how good his quarterback is, which I think is that you could write that in the storyline for just about anything that's going on offense. This player did not do his job on this play, but CJ Stroud, and it would make sense to me. I mean, they're all great, right? I'm not saying that anyone's consistently making those mistakes, but it's like you get to a point where you're trying to play as perfect football as you can. And when you can make a mistake every once in a while and it doesn't matter, like, I think it's a good feeling. It gives you a lot of confidence heading into each drive, But now we've talked about the offense. Let's talk about how we think the defense did. The Giants left their starters out there for a long time, so I think that should tell you a lot. And also, like I said at the beginning of the episode, 5 turnovers. That's 2 interceptions and 3 fumbles, I want to say. I could be wrong on that number. But, yeah, I mean, the defense is swarming. Yeah, I mean, what overall, how did you feel? Do you think it's an overreaction to say that we kind of got the validation we've been looking for from the defense against a team that's just simply put, the Giants aren't expected to do much?
I mean, I asked the question that day. I really didn't want to get too excited. It's hard not to. You see so much production. You see so much chaos that they're causing. and you're just like, wow, we get this every Sunday. And part of me had to like rein myself in and go, look, this is a bad football team, and they're making Daniel Jones is notorious for throwing the other team the football. You know, the first interception that he threw Petrie, you probably don't throw that ball. I think if there's some sort of saying, if it comes out late, you know, you probably messed up. So I feel like they did what they were supposed to do. They took advantage of a team that wasn't very good on offense. I think you get them trying to prove that they can do some things. They tried to force Malik Neighbors the football a few times, and that got him into trouble. Obviously, Derek Stingley's over there. You probably shouldn't test that man. So, I mean, it's really good to build on. It's going to be great tape for those guys to look at. I just hope that they're able to keep themselves a little even keel too. I know a lot of people made a lot of noise about, you know, the fact that Kamari Lassiter wasn't targeted. And I believe that had more to do with Malik Neighbors than Kamari Lassiter. I think that they had a point to prove that they wanted to try to get him the football. And I still haven't seen him do anything to say, yes, this is the guy. Oh my God, this is the guy. I still need to see it. And maybe I'm wrong for that, but you know, Texans Twitter was right there, like Kamari Lassiter, 0 targets, you know, locksmith. It's a done deal.
Legend. I know. Yeah, I agree with you on that there's probably more to be seen from him just based off of the fact that he wasn't targeted. I would have liked to have seen that to see how he performed, but to that same level, I mean, there's one more point that I wanted to make before we really get into this discussion, which is that I personally am a bit more impressed with it with the context that the Texans starting edges didn't play. So the Giants played their starters, and Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter did not touch the field. And it seems like Daniel Jones just couldn't find the time of day to make a throw against the starters. Once the rest of the defense toned it down, he went like 9 for 12 against the backups, which is like, cool, dude. I don't know. Like you're cherry picking against a group that's not the starters. I don't really buy it. But let's talk about. We'll start with the secondary since they really showed out. We've already covered Jalen Petrie, but I want to go deeper into it. So we've talked about what his role is, the star safety nickel playing both ways. You've made it a point that you think he should play both because it'd be good for his development. And we saw that. And Tom, you preached patience. You said that he should play this. You said everything you said played out, and it looked really good. Like if you watched that game and your takeaway wasn't, wow, Jalen Petrie year 3 is going to be scary hours for any offense that has to take on this defense, then I don't know what to tell you, man. I mean, he was everywhere. So like, I want to hear your thoughts on that again, I guess, since we kind of already talked about it at the beginning of the show.
Look, he received a lot of criticism, whether it be you or some of the other guys on socials, about his ability to be in coverage and how he was sort of a liability. And I think those were fair criticisms. I think if you had to ask him, that's probably his weakest link when it comes to everything that he does. But now that they're able to utilize him all over the football field, you got him coming off the edge at a quarterback. You got him in that like that nickel position that you're talking about, where he's catching, you know, the guy coming out of the flats or the tight end it's breaking an out route. I think these are positions where he can absolutely succeed, where it's really quick, you know, just one move and go, one decisive move. And I think over time he'll build up the secondary, you know, ball hawking, coverage skills that are they're difficult in their own right. I love the fact that the Texans have not just said, you know what, he can't play safety anymore because we don't like what he's done up to this point. I mean, you've seen it in different players all over the league, where just that time that it takes for them to get to where they need to get to, for the game to slow down, for the recognition to just be like, okay, I understand what they're trying to do to me. And I feel like over time, eventually Jalen Petrie will have all the tools in his toolkit, but to use the ones that he's really got with, that he's really strong with right now, it's a hell of a player, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to play to his strengths, and I think he can develop. That's it. That's the whole thing. So I'm not even going to talk about it anymore because I don't I don't want to talk. If I keep talking about Jalen Petrie, I might say something I don't mean. I don't know. Like, you know how I've been, but I am truly sorry, Jalen. I was unfamiliar with your game. Let's talk about Derek Stingley. That's the known thing. So obviously, like you mentioned, Kamari Laster wasn't targeted. I don't know a sane offensive coordinator in a regular season game that thinks, oh, there's a rookie on the left and a seasoned veteran on the right who's shown ball hawk skills. Let's go after the other guy. Let's go after the veteran. Let's take on Derek Stingley. What do you make of that? Do you think that the Giants were like, we're going to poke the bear? Let's just do it. Or were they just looking to get the ball to Malik Neighbors? Like, is Danny Dimes trying to form that, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase thing where it's like, screw it. He's probably up there. I'll just throw it. And it just didn't work out. Like, what do you make of it?
Honestly, I think they just didn't want to get too deep into their bag. I didn't think they wanted an audible. I didn't think they wanted to move guys around. I think they just lined them up and said, okay, Daniel, find who you want to find. And I think he's really trying to work to make Malik Neighbors the guy. So it was just like, if he's over there, then I got to figure out a way to fit that in there. I got to figure out a way to find him, and I got to beat elite coverage. To me, that doesn't make sense. To me, you need to find a way to put him in a position to win and move him around. I always feel that way. Trying to square peg, round hole never works. And I mean, say what you want about Derek Stingley. His cover skills are elite, and no one is questioning that league wide. So if you want to try him, you can. We welcome it. But I think Daniel Jones will not be doing that again in the future.
I don't think so either. I mean, challenging Derek Stingley is like buying a first-class ticket to an island, because that's what you're going to be on all game, trying to get a ball to Derek Stingley. So I guess get it past Derek Stingley, because that's not what happened in this game. But anyway, looking around the defense, obviously we talked about how Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. didn't play. What did you see that impressed you from the defensive line in this matchup?
That the backups off the edge are really, really good. Derek Barnett, Jerry Hughes, I think in spells, those guys are so good. And we're very blessed to have them, because you start to look at other teams where they're, edge rushers, and us last year, the Texans last year, once those starting edge rushers came off the field, Will Anderson and John Grenard, you had Barnett and Hughes, but I don't feel like they were in positions to succeed like they are now. And maybe it has something to do with the Giants' offensive line and them not being good. But as far as I'm concerned, they showed that in short spells, those guys can still be very elite.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think the depth between Derek Barnett and Jerry Hughes, who are guys who have either started or have been expected to be starters at some point in their career at a high level, being the depth in this defensive line room, is something that Texans fans shouldn't take for granted, because it is huge, and it's definitely something that's going to help out. The fact that the pass rush didn't really take a step back against a Giants team, mind you, is incredible to see. So, I mean, I was incredibly impressed. Other names that came to mind were like Khalil Davis, who is Marcus Harris, defensive tackle we drafted late in the draft, had a nice little play. Solomon Byrd had a forced fumble. So the rookie depth in that room showed up. And then also Ali Gay, I believe he also showed up off the edge in a big way. So, I mean, I think that room's going to, just like a lot of the other rooms on a team, is just going to be hard to trim down. There'll probably be a few guys that return for practice squad work, I think, just based off of it. It's one of those things where it's tough for the Texans to make that cut, but I think a lot of those guys could be exposed to the waiver wire and maybe not garner the interest that Texans fans believe they should. Who knows? And a lot of if they would, I mean, I think some teams might make an offer to try and prevent that if they're really that coveted of a prospect. But overall, yeah, loved what the defense did. I do have one more question for you, just based off of the linebacker room. I'm trying to switch it up, since we constantly talk about the needs of the linebacker room and where it's at. One I'll start with is how did you view the linebacker room's performance in this game?
I didn't hate it, but I mean, I don't have a player for you that I'm like, oh my God, look at these linebackers. Was there a couple plays made late in the game by Neville Hewitt?
Yes. Neville Hewitt.
Yes. Max
Max Tooley.
He made a couple plays too. That one thing that stood out to me about Max Tooley that I love, that I feel like will help him get a roster spot if he's a fringe guy. That chase down and the punch to force that fumble, all heart, all hustle. I mean, that's something that travels. That's something that you have to have. That's something that I think coaches see and they go, okay, I can work with this. You know what I mean? Yeah, all the technique in the world is important, but heart and hustle is not always with every player. And I saw that from Max. I know he made a boneheaded play early in the game, got a flag on something, I think. But to do that at the end of the game, it was really good. And it made me feel better about a linebacking room that I still don't love. Christian Harris, I absolutely need to see you, sir.
I need him too. Yeah, 100%.
Sir.
I mean, I agree that you named the two names that I would have named when asked. I think Neville Hewitt has always been a sure bet based off of his special team stuff, but I think he's showing something on the field that's worth looking into. Max Tooley is an interesting prospect to me, and I'd love to see if the Texans are really sticking with what they got. That's a guy who I think would be cool to see develop on this team. I think he went out with an injury, so I hope that it's nothing too serious. But my last question for you is this, and it kind of ties back into the running back room. So Dameon Pierce, both you and I agree, probably not at risk of leaving the team by way of cut. But if the Texans need to address the linebacking room, if they need to address depth, we always talk about trades in terms of picks and that kind of trade capital. Do you think there's a situation where maybe the Texans try and dangle Dameon Pierce as a trade for linebacker depth?
I don't know how you could. And the reason I say that is because what have you seen on the tape over the last 3 games that is going to give you any value for Dameon Pierce? And with the baseball trade deadline that just recently passed, I did the same thing where people started naming guys like Chaz McCormick to trade. And I was like, I love Chaz McCormick. I think he's a good player. You tell me what I'm selling another team on Chaz McCormick right now who's batting 200. Like that's the same vein. Like if Dameon Pierce was tearing it up, then yes, the phone would ring and they'd be like, okay, yeah, we could talk about Dameon Pierce. I'm interested. If I call someone, if I'm the GM of the Houston Texans and I offer them Dameon Pierce, they're probably laughing and hanging up the phone because it's like, we could have talked about Joe Jordan. We could have talked about, British Brooks. Don't talk to me about Dameon Pierce. Not after these performances he's put up so far. So I really feel like you're selling extremely low on Dameon Pierce. You're not going to get value. I don't know what linebacker you would go after, but it wouldn't be a household name. It would be somebody's, 4th or 5th linebacker for, a running back that you gave, that you drafted in the 3rd round. So it's kind of, I don't see it.
Fourth round.
I'm sorry, 4th round.
I thought you as the Dameon Pierce fan club president would know that information.
He's a 3rd rounder in my heart. The one thing they said on the telecast that I thought was great, and I really, really want to emphasize this to everybody I talk to. And, we're talking about linebacker depth, and we're talking about the running backs and all the issues with who we want to keep. They spoke to it on the broadcast. And I can't remember the guy's name right now because I'm terrible with names. Andy Kalu. Andy Kalu says, you know what? You know who has these same problems every year? Every year, same problems. Good football teams. Good football teams have too many players that have to cut good football players. If the Texans have to cut good football players, I get it. And I'm okay with that. I love that they have to cut good football players, that they're not going, nope, don't need that guy. Like every cut could be, damn, that guy would have been good. Those are the kind of things that excite a fan base because we're talking about number 59, 60, 61, whatever, good football players.
I agree. And I mean, to emphasize your point, there was this, I think it's PTSD in the case of Texans fans with even Caserio, I guess, but other GMs, bringing in talent and then cutting players that were viewed as could be a contributor, high potential on a team that was not very good. It's why are we cutting this player when we could use them. Whereas right now the Texans are just in a position where sometimes a player is good enough to be on a roster in the NFL and they're not good enough to be on the Texans roster. And I think that should be a badge of honor that Texans fans wear, to be like, oh yeah, like Dameon Pierce is pretty good, but like not good enough to be a Texan. It's like what Will Anderson would say, it's like not everyone's cut out to be a Texan. It's like a higher way of life. There's a higher standard being held on at 6'10" in Kirby. So you better be ready to live up to it. But yeah. All right. Well, the preseason is winding down, and pretty soon we're going to be watching some regular season football. But for now, this is what we have. So that's been our recap of the Giants game. Look out later in the week. We'll post our recap of our preview of the Rams game. Be on the lookout, kind of trying to ramp up some midweek content to spark some discussion. On Tuesday, we'll be putting out 3 biggest positions of concern. That's a solo video with me, and be on the lookout for some solo stuff from Tom too, that we'll be doing to spice up your feeds, caress your ears, if you will, with some Texans chat. So yeah. All right, I'm going to stop rambling and bring this thing to a close. I have been James Roy, and you can find me at James Roy NFL on Twitter, and you can find me at N1 Texans Fan on Instagram. Tom is at TCTom1 on Instagram and at Third Coast Tom on X, which he insists that I call it when I address his social medias, since that is what he calls it. Just kidding. That's not what he calls it. But anyways, we have been the Bullpen. Thank you for tuning in. If you are listening, you can watch us on YouTube. If you are watching, you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts at, you can find us. And this has been the Bullpen. Thank you for listening. As always, stay classy, Houston, and vamos Texans. Thanks for tuning into The Bullpen, a Texans podcast. Please like, comment, subscribe, and follow along for more Texans talk from The Bullpen.